and tried to settle in. But little things kept bothering me. There were boot prints in the snow that didn't match mine. The back door lock felt loose, like someone had recently forced it. And the cabin smelled faintly like someone else had been staying in it, stale coffee and damp clothes. I brushed it all off. Old cabins rarely feel normal. Around 10 p.m., the snow started falling hard, and I decided to get some sleep. I kept one lamp on in the main room, just in case the power went out. I've never liked complete darkness in unfamiliar places. I must have been asleep for maybe an hour when something woke me up, a soft thump somewhere inside the cabin. At first, I told myself it was the heater expanding. But the noises kept happening, slow, deliberate. Thump. Thump. Like someone was very carefully walking across the floor. My breathing froze. I stayed completely still, listening. The steps were coming from the living room, right outside the bedroom door. They would move a few steps, stop, then move again. I thought maybe an animal had gotten inside, but the steps sounded too heavy, too slow. I sat up and reached for my phone. It had 6% battery left, and no connection. I opened the bedroom door just a crack and listened. The cabin was pitch black except for the small lamp glow in the living room. That's when I noticed something even more terrifying. There was a shadow on the far wall, tall, human-shaped, moving slightly, like someone was standing between the lamp and the hallway. I slammed the bedroom door shut quietly and held it. My mind raced. There was no way anyone else should be here. And yet someone was. Someone who had been inside before I arrived. Someone who hadn't left. Someone who was now standing in my cabin in the middle of a snowstorm. I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. After about a minute, the steps began again. This time they moved toward the back of the cabin, the kitchen area. I knew I had one chance: get out through the bedroom window, get into my car, and leave. But when I lifted the curtain, my stomach dropped. There were fresh footprints in the snow leading to the window, from the outside. Like someone had stood there earlier, watching. I hesitated too long. The breathing was right outside the bedroom door now. I backed away silently, but the floor creaked under my foot. Everything went completely still. The breathing stopped. Then the doorknob turned. Slowly, inch by inch. But the door was locked. I heard the person try again. of someone walking into the woods. Nothing. Just silence again. I told myself it had to be an animal, a deer, maybe, but the cabin's porch wrapped around the front, and the boards weren't loose. Those footsteps were heavy. Human heavy. I slept terribly that night. The next morning, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the noise. Maybe stress, or just nerves from being alone. I made coffee, sat down at my laptop, and tried to work. And that's when the cabin's landline phone rang. It wasn't like a modern ringtone. It was a sharp, metallic clang, like hitting a metal pipe. It startled me so badly I almost spilled my coffee. I picked it up slowly. Hello? No answer. Just faint static, and something else. A sound so quiet I held my breath just to hear it clearly. Breathing. Not frantic or angry, just steady human breathing, like someone was standing right beside the speaker. "Who is this?" I said, voice shaking. The breathing grew louder, then abruptly stopped. A soft click followed, and the line went dead. I placed the phone back in its cradle and stared at it for a long time. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reminded myself that old landlines could sometimes pick up interference, but the breathing, that wasn't interference. The landline rang again that evening, but I didn't answer. Whoever, or whatever, was on the other end could keep calling. I tried to sleep, but sometime after midnight, the footsteps came back. They started on the porch. Thump. 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 Slow and deliberate. I sat up in bed with the blankets clenched in my fists. Then the footsteps moved toward the bedroom window. They stopped right outside. I didn't dare look. Every instinct screamed at me not to. A soft rustling followed, as if someone was patting the wall, or dragging their palms across the wooden boards. After nearly a full minute, the footsteps moved away again. This time, I heard them go around the side of the cabin, to the back, then fade into the woods. I didn't sleep at all after that. By the fourth day, I was done. Deadline or not, I needed to leave. I packed my laptop and bags and stepped onto the porch. That's when I noticed footprints. Not animal tracks, actual human footprints. Bare feet. Long, narrow, with dirt pressed into the wooden boards. They led from the stairs, to the front door, to the window, and around the side of the cabin. I felt sick. I was grabbing my keys. Forward. When I looked in the rearview mirror, he wasn't chasing me. He was just watching me drive away. Watching like someone losing a toy. I thought that was the end of it, but an hour down the highway, finally back in cell service range, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail came in. Against my better judgment, I listened. The message was nothing but heavy breathing. And in the background, the sound of creaking porch boards. I checked with the rental company later. According to them, the cabin has no landline service. The phone was disconnected years ago. But it rang. Twice. Even now, months later, sometimes my phone buzzes late at night with an unknown number. I block each one, but more appear the next week. Always the same pattern. Always the same silence behind them. And once, just once, I heard something familiar through the static on the voicemail. Footsteps. Wooden footsteps. Slow. Careful. Remembered. Just like the ones outside the cabin. My job for the wildlife department wasn't supposed to be dangerous. I wasn't a ranger, and I wasn't a cop. I was basically a part-time wildlife tech, the person who hiked into remote areas to check water sensors, replace batteries in motion cams, and log wildlife activity. The department used contractors like me because the full-time rangers were spread thin across hundreds of square miles of forest. On paper, it sounded peaceful. Long hikes, quiet forests, no crowds, no stress. And honestly, the first few months were exactly like that. I remember telling my sister that it felt like getting paid to take long nature walks. The worst thing that ever happened was almost stepping on a rattlesnake. But in October, they assigned me Cabin Circuit 12. That was the beginning of the worst week of my life. Cabin Circuit 12 covered an isolated zone of thick woods and old, unused service roads, with a tiny, run-down ranger cabin that had been boarded up years earlier. The department told me it wasn't in use anymore, but it was still technically on the inspection list in case hikers or hunters wandered into it. I didn't think much of it at first. But by the time I left that cabin, running through the trees with my backpack half unzipped, lungs burning, knowing someone had been living inside it, I realized there are places deep in the woods that should be left alone. And there are people who choose to live in those places for reasons you don't want to know. The first day of the circuit started normally. The air had that early fall crispness, cold enough that each breath looked like smoke. The trail markers It was nothing. I logged my report, took pictures, and headed back. But halfway through the hike out, I heard it. A whistle. Not a bird call, this was a tune. Human. Slow. Rising then falling. Repeating. And it was coming from somewhere behind me. I stopped walking, but the whistling continued. I didn't see anyone. The woods were too dense. Every shadow felt like a person standing still. The whistling stopped abruptly. No footsteps. No branches snapping. Just silence. I walked the remaining 5 miles back to my truck shaking. That night, I barely slept. My brain kept replaying the footprints behind the cabin, the eerie whistling, the silence that followed. The next morning, the department radioed me. Need you to go back to cabin 12. Motion cam near it went offline. I didn't want to. Every cell in my body screamed no. But I didn't have a choice, the job was the job. The hike-in felt worse this time. Not physically, mentally. I kept turning around, feeling like someone was pacing behind me, staying just far enough not to be seen. When I reached the cabin clearing, my stomach dropped. Because the boarded-up door was open. Not fully. But one board had been pried loose and was leaning against the wall. There were fresh scratches on the cabin window glass, long vertical lines, almost like someone dragged a knife down it. Not clean cuts. More like pressure scratching using dull metal. Someone had definitely been here. I stepped carefully inside the cabin clearing, heart pounding. The air smelled stronger now, like sweat, rot, and old clothing left damp for too long. I went to check the disconnected motion cam behind the trees. That's when I saw something that didn't belong. A pile of clothes, half buried in leaves. Not ranger clothes. Not hunter gear. Thin, dirty, and too worn to be anyone camping. A jacket. Ripped and stained. A pair of jeans that looked like they'd been soaked and dried in mud. And socks. Dozens of mismatched socks, some stiff and discolored. I backed away slowly. Something rustled behind the cabin. I froze. The sound was soft, fabric brushing against wood, or someone dragging their foot across leaves. I held my breath. Then the whistle. Quiet. Drawn out. The same tune as yesterday. Monitor to face me. There was grainy nighttime footage of the cabin clearing. At first, I didn't see anything. Then the figure stepped out from behind a tree. Tall. Thin. Dressed in dirty, oversized clothing. Long hair covering most of their face. They moved like they weren't used to walking upright, slow, dragging steps, exactly like the footprints. Then the figure walked to the cabin window and pressed their face against the glass. And they stayed there. Not moving. Just staring out. For almost 3 full hours. At one point, they lifted something toward the window. A knife. Rusted. Small. Used to make the scratches. And then, the worst part. My supervisor paused the video. You see that timestamp? The timestamp was from the night before my first visit. Meaning whoever was in that cabin had been inside the entire time I was walking around outside it. We alerted police. They searched the cabin with dogs. What they found inside made me sick. Blankets. Food wrappers. A bucket used as a bathroom. More mismatched socks. And drawings scratched into the walls using the same dull knife, drawings of people approaching the cabin, taken from angles only visible from inside, watching. One drawing had a shape wearing my same backpack. I never went back. The official report called the person a transient squatter, but the cops never found them. The woods were too big. Too empty. Too full of places to hide. Every now and then, when I'm driving on a rural road at night with the radio low and the forest stretching endlessly on both sides, I hear it. That whistle. That long, slow rise and fall. I still don't know if it's in my head, or if he's still out there, somewhere near the abandoned cabin, living in the silence between the trees.